Bhadram karne vishrunuyama devaha Bhadram pashye makshabhirya jatraha Sthireirangei stuštuvagum sastanubihi Vyashema devahitam yadayuhu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, O gods, may we hear with our ears what is auspicious. O ye adorable ones, may we see with our eyes what is auspicious. May we sing praises to ye and enjoy with a strong body, limbs and body, the life allotted to us by the gods. Om, peace, peace, peace. This world, with all its animate beings and inanimate objects, is nothing but the creation of the mind. This world, with all its animate beings and inanimate objects, is nothing but the creation of the mind. When the activities of the mind cease, there is no world, no duality, there is only God. Gaudapada Karika. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ramakrishna Monastery, and to all mothers and children, happy Mother's Day. Because where there is a mother, there is a child. So I can see that most of our mothers are celebrating at home. We don't have smart audience today, but that's all right. Today is a continuation of what I consider a very important topic. In fact, this topic was what really truly triggered my spiritual journey. That is to know more about our minds. How to understand our minds, and if at all there is a way to control it. It's really hard. And even though I always bring up the topic of the mind in different ways, from different angles, this is the second lecture where I deal directly to this particular topic. The first one was called the Tranquil Mind. And in that lecture, you can find it online, I gave you some elements, a lot of information, but mostly tools for you to sort of analyze yourself and understand more about yourself, about this instrument, this tool that is in our hands, because it's a tool, and that is called the mind. So, I don't know if you know it, but we all have a mind. And we better keep it sane and don't lose it. So, we usually talk about the mind and identify with the mind as us. But in reality, it is a tool. A tool, we need to learn how to use it. And I thought about it, and it kind of came to my mind this morning. It's like driving a huge semi-tract, this Michigan octopede with a huge load. I don't know if you've ever driven these kind of tracks. I mean, you don't have the true dimension of how big it is. And it is dangerous, particularly if it is loaded, if it comes with a huge load. So that's kind of how it feels, when you drive when you drive this mind of ours without much expertise on how it's it works and its dimension and the consequences. So it takes time and practice to get used to it and learn how to drive it properly. And for those who are committed, you know better. It takes years and years, patience, to understand why I do this, or why did I behave that way. So the mind is a tool in our hands, and in this lecture called The Tranquil Mind, the idea was to give you some aspects and facts about the mind, of the mind, so that we can understand it better. And I mentioned that the ultimate way to make your mind steady, but I didn't quite get the time to explain myself. I usually like to explain everything step by step, so I will ask you to follow me again on this journey to understand more and more about the mind. So let me try to do this with this lecture that I call the mind stuff. Just stuff. And so in the last lecture, The Tranquil Mind, we talk about this psychic instrument called Antakarana. For those, most of you know, Manas, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahamkara. Manas is called the mind, Chitta, memory, Buddhi is our intellect, and Ahamkara is the I and mind or ego. All these four combined together is what we call the mind, or Antakarana. And these are different aspects of our identity. The moment we identify with our bodies, there comes the mind. So we talk about different levels in which the mind operates. The conscious, unconscious, and also Vedanta talks about the superconscious. That controlling the mind, and this is important, I mentioned, controlling the mind belongs to the conscious state. And that in order to control the subconscious, we need to be established in yoga. We need to get hold of our minds a little bit better. So here in this lecture, I'll give you two things. The reason why we need to somehow deal with our minds and pay attention to it, and understand the importance that as human beings, oh boy, we could be our best friends or our worst enemies. So in order to help ourselves, we have to have a way of life. Number one. Number two, that is the second tool, or the second means that our scriptures gives us to deal with our minds, is later. So, we talked about that there is something more powerful than the mind. The mind and the ego, what is that is more powerful? By now you should know. Come on. You know what Vedanta says. That what you truly are is neither the mind nor the ego. It's a self that is constant, always present, always the witness. There is a witness that watches the mind, pure consciousness, that is always present. In Sanskrit, we call that the Atman. We mentioned that we are instruments in the hands of the self. When we identify ourselves with the mind, instruments in the hands of the self, this body, this mind, is nothing but an instrument. God lives within in the form of the inner self, which is pure awareness. We superimpose the notion of I am so and so. You follow me? I am Atma Brahma, says the Upanishads. The inner self of a human being is what we call God. The inner self of each and every one of us is that God already. Whether we like it or not, whether we don't want to accept it or not, it is a reality. It shines through our eyes all the time. The mind is responsible for our own contraction the moment we identify ourselves with what we call bhokta, or the experiencer, the enjoyer. I am enjoying, I am experiencing. And the mind is responsible for our own contraction when we identify ourselves with the karta, or the doer. I do. The moment you say and you experience that, you separate yourself from everything else. You become somehow independent. And good luck. That's the big problem. But if we can clean our minds, there is nothing left but God. Yet, how are we to control our mind? We talked about the Pretties, that we are tortured by the Pretties, the waves of thought and feelings that cause the mind to become agitated. Those thoughts and feelings are called Pretties. It is these that must be stilled. These Pretties, says Patanjali, must be stilled if we are to experience the self. So we have work to do. The problem is not our minds, it's the Pretties. It's our thoughts and feelings. We keep following them. Patanjali explains that the mind has got 5 kinds of Pretties. I'm going to go fast because we talked about it. One is called Pramana, or right knowledge. Viparyaya, wrong knowledge, second. Third, Vikalpa, fantasy. Fourth, Nidra, sleep. And memory, Smriti. So the mind is not an object or substance, or a substance that can be brought under your thumb. It is all powerful, and we know that. So we have to try to steal the modifications of the mind. The Lord in the Gita says that the mind is restless, fickle, turbulent, strong, and obstinate. And I think that it is as difficult to control as the wind. So the Lord himself acknowledges how difficult it is to deal with this instrument we call the mind. But to summarize the Tranquil Mind, I gave you right away what the solution was, without explaining myself. And I told you that in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord himself, he says that among the senses, I am the mind. I am the Samaveda among the 4 Vedas. I am Indra among the celestial gods. And among the senses, I am the mind. And because of this, I told you that also that Krishna gives us, in a nutshell, what we should do. That is to center our minds in our higher nature, the self, who we truly are. To sit there and experience and live without identifying ourselves with the changes of the world or the phenomena. However, that is not an easy task. So the Lord says, center your mind on me. Superimpose your real nature on me, name and form. And in thinking on me, you will be connected to yourself. Do you follow me? Therefore, Jesus says, I am my Father and one. Just think of me as my Father. In India, all these discoveries was not by searching outside in the world, but to going within. In the Mundaka Upanishad, we find Shaunaka, the well-known householder, having approached Arigiras. He says, "Oh, adorable sir, which is that thing which, having been known, all these become known?" In other words, what is that knowing which everything becomes known? That's the question. Because we want to know everything, right? But in order to know that, we have to go within and get used to it. And fall in love with that kind of approach. To have a relationship with ourselves. So the easiest way to tame our minds, I mentioned, is to follow Krishna's advice. That is to remember him all the time. Because in remembering him, we will be connecting ourselves with our real nature. Now, therefore, Mayeva mana adat swamai buddhim niveshaya nivasishyasi mayeva ata urdhvam na samshaya. Fix your mind on me alone and surrender your intellect to me. But what happens after we fix our minds on him? Is that easy? Really? That seems to be the solution. But let's think about it. Let's reason over this. It doesn't have to be blind. We can understand the reason why Sri Krishna is encouraging all of us to think of him and to fix our minds on him. So this understanding in a spiritual life is essential. Understanding is essential because the moment you understand, the moment you can commit to do something about it. The self, capital self, manifests in all our thoughts and feelings, and it is the self that allows us to perceive everything. It is said that the self has two aspects, prakasha, the light, and vimarsha, understanding. Prakasha illuminates everything in this world. Vimarsha understands that which has been illumined. The self has these aspects. Through prakasha, we are able to see an object. Through vimarsha, we are able to identify it and understand its nature. No matter how bad or how good we feel, the knower, the self, remains detached from all our thoughts and feelings. He does. It is us. It is that knower who is deluded when going outside or experiencing the world, and not just that, our inner self, our minds, what's going on within us. So the inner knower is the self. The mind is the body of the self. It can be recognized. It can't recognize the self, the mind, because it's its body. So, conclusion, we have to own our minds. We have to understand our minds. And in understanding our minds, we would know that its nature is tranquil already. That was the conclusion. And I based this conclusion, of course, on these statements coming from the scriptures, from the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. The mind, the nature of the mind, is itself tranquil. So when we come back to ourselves and we connect with our capital self, we experience that tranquility, perfect tranquility, that perfect peace that we all want in this world. We all crave for that peace. Now, we talked about Patanjali Sutra, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the stealing of the vrittis or modifications of the mind. It is this that must be stilled if we are to experience the self. Now, how can they be stilled, this modification, these vrittis, thoughts and feelings? Abhyasa, vairagya, abhyam tan nirodha. By intense practice. So it's not that we can relax and do nothing about it. We have to pay attention and practice. And by detachment, understand what are the relationships we have with our senses, what are our attachments, our likes and dislikes. And the moment we understand them, we recognize them, we can deal with them. They say, I was absent-minded, I did not see it. I was absent-minded, I did not hear it. It is through the mind that one sees and hears. The mind has the power of looking back into itself. With the help of the mind, we can analyze the mind and see what is going on in the mind. But why is it that the mind is not always found in a uniform state? Have you ever asked yourselves, why is it that my mind is always restless? The reason is that the mind is compound of three substantive, coming from substance, forces called the gunas. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Now most of you are familiar with this. I'm not going to go deep into these concepts. But these gunas are also the basic constituents of the entire universe, physical and mental. These forces are rajas, that is the principle of mobility, motivity, leading to activity, expressed as attraction and repulsion, desire and restlessness. We need to understand this. Tamas is the principle of inertia, resulting in inaction, dullness and delusion. is typified as darkness or inactivity. And the third force is called sattva, that is the principle of poise, conducive to purity. Knowledge and joy is the equilibrium of the previous two. Now, tamas causes the mind to move on a low level. Rajas scatters the mind and makes it restless, and sattva gives it a higher direction. It is not easy to define these gunas. Hence, the great teacher, Vidyaranya, defines them according to their effects. Non-attachment, forgiveness, generosity are products of sattva. Desire, anger, avarice, etc. are products of rajas. Lethargy, confusion, drowsiness are products of tamas. The constitution of individual minds is determined by the various combinations and permutations of these gunas, outside and within us in our minds. You see this fight within us of these forces. We all have them. This fight is constantly going on within us. Tamas, rajas, and sattva, when we want to come down or meditate. This explains the varieties in human nature and also the vacillating nature of the mind. These forces are working within us and in all phenomena. And the mind is subtle. It's a still phenomena, but subtle. So these three gunas are also there, and we perceive them all the time. So we often say, I have changed my mind. This would be impossible if the mind were composed only by one substance, one force only. In Vyasa's commentary on yoga, he classified the mental activity, and this is important again. He classified the mental activity into 5 states. Shipta, agitated, scattered. Mudha, dull, lethargic. Vikshipta, partially focused. Ekagra, one-pointed. Niruddha, fully arrested. Kshipta, scattered brain. Kshipta means scattered. It's always active. This is a state of mind. The kind of mind which is constantly at work and never restful. In this state, the whole mind rushes like a mad elephant in whatever direction it chooses. Do you know this? That's one of the states of our minds. Kshipta. It wanders here and there without any aim or purpose and cannot be brought under control. When you try to deal with that monkey, constantly moving from one branch to another. This is the most common state of the mind that most of us are in during our waking state. You recognize it. This state is fully dominated by the guna we called rajas, activity. In this state, the mind is totally restless, jumping from one thought to another, from one emotion to the next, from one object to the next. It happens to us. With our phones now, you have a 1 second, 1 minute free, and what are you doing? Where's my phone? You want to read the latest news, what's going on? One oscillates between love and hate, likes and dislikes. This is called the scattered mind, Shipta. Now the second state of mind is called Mudha, dull, somnolent. Mudha means stupid and confused. We know that too. In this state, intellect, understanding, and reason are enveloped, as it were, with darkness of ignorance. The Mudha state is dominated by the guna of tamas, inertia, in which the mind is dull, sleepy, lethargic, and is lacking alertness. The Mudha state is not productive. Nothing can be achieved. These are the two extreme states of activity and inactivity of the mind. During the waking state, one usually alternates between Shipta and Mudha states. Rajas can propel us to be attracted toward an object of the senses. However, if we are denied that object, tamas can drive us into a state of sadness, depression, or delusion. Try if you want something so bad, and you think you're going to get it, and all of a sudden, no. Then what happens to you? You get frustrated. So you oscillate from one to the other. Next comes Vikshipta, partially focused, sometimes active and sometimes dull. In our pursuits of life, material or spiritual, there are moments when the sattva guna, which is that equilibrium, begins to dominate the mind. Yes, and the mind can find moments of focus and concentration. You also know them. Let's burn some incense or a candle. We feel good. And induce ourselves to some kind of tranquil state of mind. We can focus a little bit, and then what happens? Again, we are hit by Shipta. Our active mind, thoughts and feelings come to us. And they disturb the sattva or sattvic state. In our pursuits of life, material or spiritual, there are moments when the sattva guna begins to dominate, and the mind can find moments of focus and concentration. However, old habits keep pulling the mind away from sattva and back to rajas and tamas, what I described before. The Vikshipta states represent this pulling away from the partial state of concentration, and is brought about by the 9 impediments to concentration. And we all know them, these 9 impediments, they are called vikshepas. So it's all good, we are happy, we get a little bit of concentration, we can meditate, and all of a sudden a thought comes to us. And we start following it. And then it can take us to emotion and feelings. Also, these impediments can be illness, negligence, misperceptions, dullness, laziness, failure, doubt, cravings, instability. And they don't come alone. They have their companions: mental and physical pain, sadness and frustration, unsteadiness of the body, irregular breath. What happens? Literally, a mind is under the influence of this vikshepa. All these obstacles or impediments to concentration. In meditation, we find brief periods when the mind seems to be still and focused on the object of meditation. However, soon it gets distracted by other thoughts, which is called vikshepa or vikshipta state. Till now all is clear? We have three states of mind. One that is active, the other is dull or inactive, and the other one is when we try to get some concentration and then it gets interrupted again. The next state of mind is called ekagra, one-pointed. In one word, it means concentrated. In this state, the mind is fully focused on the object of meditation, and the object becomes fully illumined, realized, and completely known. Niruddha, fully arrested in concentration. That is the fifth state of mind. The fifth mental condition is called niruddha, the state of well-controlled concentration, in which all involuntary activity is subdued and the mind, transcending its ordinary limitations, reaches the superconscious state of samadhi, the state of God consciousness. Now, the three states are to be found in ordinary people like us. And none of them is of any help in a spiritual life. That is, kshipta, scattered, always active; mudha, stupid and confused; vikshipta, sometimes active, sometimes dull. The last two alone are conducive to spiritual growth. Ekagra, one-pointed, or concentrated, and niruddha, perfect concentration, that is the goal, or samadhi, when the subject and object become one. In the fourth state, one-pointed or concentrated, we can realize the true nature of things. All painful modifications of the mind become less and less. All knots of desire for worldly things and sense pleasures are loosened, and they cease to disturb the peace of mind. This state of mind leads gradually to the attainment of the fifth state, or niruddha. Those, therefore, who aspire to a spiritual perfection should make every effort to reach the last two stages. In this state, no new samskaras or impressions can arise. Even though past impressions still remain, they are made ineffective and can no longer cause afflictions once you reach this state of niruddha. The above classification I just gave you of the states of mind by Vyasa help us analyze our mental state. When the fifth or superconscious state of concentration is attained, the true nature of the knower, Atman, is manifested. So what do we get from here? The goal is to achieve concentration. Concentration of our minds. Is that clear? And not because I say it, it's been fully analyzed by these great psychologists from ancient times. I just gave you just a brief summary. But what happens to us? At other times, as we have seen, the knower, who we truly are, appears as identified with the modifications of the mind. Sometimes the knower is identified with impulses, good or bad, sometimes with emotions. So from the highest state of samadhi, we are coming down back again to our regular or normal state of mind. That's what happens to us. We identify with the Pretties, the modifications of the mind. Good, bad, sometimes emotions, painful and pleasurable sensations, or with the changes of the gross body and its diseases. This identification of the spirit or Atman with the changes of the mind and body is the cause of our bondage. Misery and suffering. And anything else that you want to add to it. When the knower of misery and sorrow becomes identified with them, he appears as miserable and sorrowful. But in reality, the knower is always distinct and separate from the object known. And you should know that. Whether you fully understand it or not, take it as it is. Embrace it. For instance, the red iron ball. The iron ball is heated in a furnace. It appears red and hot. An ignorant person looking at it will easily mistake it for fire. Meaning the intellect and the mind and body may easily mistake it for fire. The intellect, mind, and body may be compared to the iron ball, and the self, the Atman, in all of us is the fire. As we can know the true nature of the iron ball by separating it from the fire, so we can learn the true nature of the iron ball, of mind stuff. When in the state of samadhi we separate it from the fire or the self. We can also illustrate this in a different way. When any bright colored object is placed near a piece of pure and transparent crystal, the whole crystal is so suffused with the color thrown upon it that only a close observer can detect that in itself the pure crystal has no color. Similarly, the true nature of the Atman or spirit is covered by the reflected light of the constantly changing modifications of the mind stuff, such as thoughts, feelings, passion, desires, until the pure crystal of Atman appears to have these modifications in itself. Only the ability to rightly discriminate the real from the apparent can enable us to discover the truth in either case. Sri Ramakrishna says, by turning the mind within, one acquires discrimination and through discrimination, one thinks of the truth only. What is the truth? The truth is, if for a moment anyone can make his true self free from the changeful reflections of the mental activities, that instant he or she will realize the Atman or spirit, and he will cease to commit further mistakes. We have a taste of it when we go to deep sleep. And when we come back, we don't remember anything but a blissful state. Oh, I don't know what happened. I don't remember anything. But I am so happy, and I rested so well. We get a hint of it when we go close, close, and close, and when the ego disappears in deep sleep. No longer he will identify himself or herself with the various changes of the mind and body. Concentration is the process by which this realization can be accomplished. Do you agree? Are you here? Where are your minds? Concentration. There are various methods for developing the power of concentration. When you have fully attained this control over your power of voluntary attention. What is your attention? If it is here, you are here. I know this is heavy, but I'm surprised that you are looking at me like, oh. Good. This is important. There are various methods for developing the power of concentration. When you have fully attained this control over your power of voluntary attention, you will be able to concentrate your whole mind on any object, whether external or internal, concrete or abstract, material or spiritual. So, concentration. Vivekananda says, concentration of the powers of the mind is our only instrument to help us see God. The central idea in all this training is to attain to that power of concentration. Concentration comes with the power of meditation. So, we know by now that the nature of the mind is very difficult to understand, very subtle. We know by now that mind, according to Vedanta, is something distinct from the physical body, on one hand, and also is distinct from the spiritual self on the other. Do you see it? It's neither the body nor the knower or who we truly are. It's a tool. It's an instrument. And we should know how to use it. It is not identified with the spiritual self. Why? Because the spiritual self is the knower, and the mind is not the knower. Mind is an object of knowledge. Just as you perceive an external object, similarly, you can observe your own mind, can't you? Since it is an object of knowledge, an object of cognition, mind cannot be the knower. You are essentially the knower, the witness. That knower perceives through the eyes, perceives through the ears, through the nose. That knower not only is distinct from all these organs of perception, but is also distinct from the mind, because that knower visualizes the mind, observes the mind. You can observe your mind directly through introspection. Others can observe your mind only indirectly. Only your own mind is observable by you directly through introspection. And there you are on your own. And it's good to be on our own. We should like it. We monks said, we keep saying this, we are alone in this world. We come alone, we go alone, but we are monks for you, but you should know the truth. All other methods of studying the minds are indirect, because the mind is an object of knowledge. Consciousness is not intrinsic in the mind. Consciousness is intrinsic in the knower. The knower is self-aware. The knower is self-evident. The knower is self-revealing. And you know that because you know who you are. You have that awareness of your existence. You are the knower. Not your idea of you, the one behind. So why is the knower self-revealing? Because it is self-intelligence, self-awareness. Such is the self. And what is the mind then? The mind is an object of knowledge, just as the chair in front of me. If your mind moves away so that you cease to pay attention to the speaker, you won't be able to hear nor to see this guy. They say I was absent-minded, I did not see it. I was absent-minded, I did not hear it. It is through the mind that one sees and hears and perceives. You are there with a perfectly good pair of eyes and ears, but if your mind turns elsewhere, you won't see, you won't hear. This mind is distinct from the self, distinct from these organs of vision, distinct from the entire body. These are connected very closely, inseparable, but still distinct. That means mind is not an integral part of the body, nor is it an integral part of the spiritual self. They are connected, but they are distinct. Mind is the seat of internal perception. And guess what? Vedanta studies the mind. And particularly, Vedanta pays a lot of attention to the mind as the seat of our impressions, of our thoughts and feelings. These impressions are left on the mind not only by perceptions of objects, but also through our activities. We have the 5 organs of perception and the 5 organs of action. You all know them. Just as functions of the organs of cognition leave some impression on the mind, also the organ of action. These impressions become the source of our memory, as well as the source of our likes and dislikes. Analyze yourself. Your identity, your personality is based on what you like and what you dislike. And that's the source of our thought process. Everything is around your likes and dislikes. Oh, Swami's been speaking for more than an hour now. You see something, some impression is left on the mind, and from that impression you can create an image of the thing. Similarly, if you speak with your organ of speech, or you hold something, or give something, work with your hands, or move with your legs, any function that is done by these organs of actions, our hands, our legs, our ears. No, what are the functions? What are they? Organs, hands, legs, speech, organ of procreation and evacuation. All these, they leave an indelible impression on the mind. The mind is a huge storehouse of all these impressions. Not a single impression is eliminated. They are all stored there. You cannot forget even what you did in your early life. Sometime or other, through right association, the impressions will come to the upper part of the mind. Please bear with me. It's going to get more interesting. These impressions create your disposition, your tendencies, and become the source of your memory, your likes and dislikes. These impressions live within you as subtle forces that fructify effects of these impressions. That is, they will create for you a favorable or unfavorable result. It is because of these impression forces that we reap the fruits of our actions. These impressions lie within us in two different forms. They are manifest and those that are not manifest. Now, Vedanta does not divide the mind into two cut and dry compartments or sections, conscious or unconscious. What is unconscious now can be conscious tomorrow or an hour later. So there is no division between the mind, such as conscious or unconscious. Those impressions that are unmanifest are actually in the subconscious level. The unmanifested impressions are in the subconscious level. Those impressions that become manifest are within the conscious level. And what is the conscious level? Conscious level is the range within your ego consciousness. So you have power. Where? In your ego consciousness state. That which comes within the view of this ego consciousness is the conscious mind. That which is outside the range or below the range of this ego consciousness is the subconscious or unconscious mind. According to Vedanta, there is also a superconscious state. We talked about this in the Tranquil Mind. What we generally call unconscious is below this ego consciousness. What we call conscious is within the range of this ego consciousness. And there is a superconscious state, which is beyond the ego consciousness. That we don't see. When there is actual spiritual experience, when we realize God, then we go beyond the range of this ego consciousness. And we get out of the barriers of the ego. You know what happens to saints, for example. They go beyond the ego consciousness. They transcend the conscious state. They go to the superconscious state. But ordinarily, you are within the range of this ego consciousness, and we have a good deal of our impressions below the range of our ego consciousness. Is it clear? As we expressed before, the first three states which are found in ordinary people are Shipta, scattered mind, Mudha, stupid and confused. Vikshipta, sometimes active and sometimes dull. This is within the level of the ego, conscious ego. The unmanifested impressions lie in the subconscious mind below the ego consciousness. And this is the problem. Below the ego consciousness. They are called the overpowered one, the attenuated form, and the dormant form. Many of our impressions lie overpowered, and they can be triggered by different circumstances. We know them. We know they are there, those evil tendencies we don't want to show. But when we are triggered, they come up. We all want to be saints until something happens. And then we show a different face. The dark forces within us, they can assert themselves at any time. Dark forces within the mind should be attenuated gradually. They should not be simply suppressed. They should be weakened by cultivating different tendencies. Do you follow? Suppressing means you consciously say, oh, it's okay, it's all right. But to create a counteracting action or to cultivate a different tendency against that, that's the way to go. To elevate your mind. Therefore, if we want a safe state, we have to gradually weaken them, attenuate them. And that is the purpose of culture. That is the purpose of education. That is the purpose of good associations. Do you understand why we kind of have to have a disciplined life? And we humans understand this. We all go to church, we are introduced to a God, and we kind of know intuitively that that's the way to go. We have to cultivate moral values, ethical values, spiritual values. Why? Well, sometimes we forget, but now you should not. We have all these impressions at the level of our ego consciousness, below our ego consciousness. And look, all these impressions lie within us from the moment we can't even remember. I'm going to be a little extreme. When we were even animals. And they are being suppressed by us. Some of you know this, all of us. Right? We all have that instinctive nature within us. You understand how important it is to accept this. In a way, we are an evolution of something that had not intellect. We have all that plus the intellect, which can make us gods, or can make us very dangerous people. So that's why we are encouraged to lead a God-centered life, or a religious way of life. There are many impressions and tendencies lying dormant in the mind, asleep in the form of seeds or vasanas. Vasanas is the seed of desire, a desire that arises in you when you see something, for example. The samskara is the tree, a grown-up tree. the desire is stronger and it's harder to pull it out. As long as they are asleep, they cannot do any harm. In spite of them, we can make spiritual progress, intellectual progress, and moral progress. But hey, is that all? Does all have to be bad? In this ancient Indian tradition, we receive a spiritual education through what we call a guru or a teacher. And it is said that subtle energies, we kind of have an idea now, gets transmitted to the one who takes charge of you, that is your teacher, by the process of initiation. And it is well known that it is expressed now with these things, I have to take my disciples' sin. You might have heard or read this. And I don't know much about it, because this is within the realm of the adriksha, the unseen. But I have seen this with my own eyes. My own guru, the Swami from which I got initiation, every time, or most of the times that he would give initiation, the next day he was somebody else. So one day I called his attention, I said, Swami, don't you think that this is not good, to take all these bad karmas and, from other people? Say, no, don't think that way. Not all is bad. There are also good tendencies. Indeed, not all is bad. The unconscious does not only contain what we call dark forces. Many spiritual and moral possibilities are also hidden within the unconscious. And that's what we have to connect to grow and flourish. This storehouse of impressions contains both good and bad elements. It is through the conscious mind that we have to overcome the unconscious. There is no other way. The conscious mind has self-determination, the will. With willpower, you can resist. Vedanta stresses self-determination, commitment, which is the special power of the conscious mind. We have to try to be true to ourselves and give the right direction to our life. Direct your life to higher values. You don't have to suppress, neither suppress nor repress. Just embrace it, period. The way of life, we Swamis like to express this, is a God-centered life, where we are reminded of that symbol that we superimpose and infuse life, the life of our God, because it's on us. We give life to this symbol that represents the highest thought we can think of. And that should be the center of our lives. And Vedanta also, we have that, suggests another way to develop ourselves. We are back to concentration. How do you concentrate? How to achieve concentration? Those who need to go, you can go. I give you permission. Please. I'm sorry, I'm going to take another 5 to 10 more minutes. Do you agree, or shall I close? Keep going. To achieve concentration, We do it through the practice of meditation, dhyana. Meditation is one of the means we have to achieve that concentration. But when I say meditation, I don't just mean being seated cross-legged. It's also that kind, and also the active meditation. We call it mindfulness. Meditation or dhyanam is the mental exercise by which we learn how to understand our own mind. It's a mental exercise by which we learn how my mind works so that we can manage and direct our minds and thoughts. Meditation is not silencing the mind. It is not stopping the mind. It is not curbing the mind. It is not restraining the mind. But it is directing the mind, directing your thoughts, and deal with the subject matter that I choose. Meditation is the constant remembrance of the thing meditated upon, flowing like an unbroken stream of oil poured out from one vessel to another. Meditation can be defined as a constant flow of similar thoughts, a constant flow of similar thoughts centered on that object of meditation. You come back to your object of meditation. The question is, what should we meditate upon? Because that we will become. And Vedanta suggests that if we want to become something, we have to come back to our capital self. We have to meditate on our real self, your spiritual self, which is not part of this physical body. Your spiritual self belongs to the Supreme Spirit, the Atman and Brahman that we call God. We meditate on this spiritual self and the relation of this spiritual self we have with the divine being. In meditation, I learn to discipline my mind. I can get hold of it, be in charge of it, guide it the way I want, so that it helps me connect with my real self. But it has to be you, not the mind, you. You. How do you do that? With the power of your will, your willpower. The truth is, if for a moment anyone can make his true self free from the changeful reflections of the mental activities, that instant he or she will realize the Atman or Spirit and will cease to commit further mistakes. Undoubtedly, says Krishna, the mind is restless. The mind is hard to control. But by practice and dispassion, observing those tendencies and impressions that are not helping you to grow spiritually, it can be controlled. Through the practice of concentration of the mind, these important powers can be developed. In my last talk, I mentioned that our scriptures talk very little or speak very little about how to attain God, but instead they are almost entirely devoted to describing the means of purifying and stilling our minds, meaning to achieve concentration, to direct our attention. It's all about that. I don't know if you noticed. So that's the reason why in the lecture, The Tranquil Mind, I closed with Sri Krishna's advice. You should remember that one of the modifications of the mind is the Pramana, source of knowledge. And one of the sources of knowledge is the discoveries of these seers of the truth, the experiences of those who have realized the self. And many of these are recorded. These treasures are out there for us. And we find them in the Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads. In the Gita, the Lord says, Mayeva mana ahadatsva mayi buddhim niveshaya. Nivasivshasi mayeva ata urdhvam na samshayaha. If you fix your mind on me and surrender your intellect to me, you will always live in me. This world, with all its animate beings and inanimate objects, is nothing but the creation of the mind. When the activities of the mind cease, there is no world, there is no duality, there is only God. Thank you. Well, so, what did we learn today?
It's all about the practice.
It's practice.
I have to apologize for not understanding the whole of you all the way through the talk. I found it very profound at times that I was getting it. I think my struggle, because I'm fairly new at this, is meditation and
Concentration.
And it seems like to try to concentrate on God, it seems to me that God is incomprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
We each have maybe ideas about what God is,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't seem to be totally comprehensible. Einstein said that the universe is comprehensible. And I can remember one night looking at the heavens and thinking, if he said it's comprehensible, I will try to comprehend it. And what came out of that was that wherever you are is the center of the universe, because it's infinite in every direction. That seems to be a comprehensible thought,
Mm-hmm.
but God
Mm-hmm.
is so much beyond that.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Does anybody have the same kind of a point of view? Does anybody else? So God is your own creation. God is that universe that can or could be comprehended. Mm-hmm. God is your own idea. God is yourself.
I have an easy time with that.
Devoid of all these identifications and all your ideas about yourself.
It's in the concentration part that I'm having trouble.
When you
concentrate
when you let go, if you let yourself be without any kind of identification, all that is left is God. What is everywhere and in everything.
How do you concentrate on that?
So, because it's so difficult, because they are so intertwined, you and matter, You and your mind, you have to trick your mind. And you trick your mind by embracing a symbol of that reality who is beyond all identification. And by connecting with that symbol, you are connecting with the essence and meaning of that symbol within you, which is you. But if I tell you meditate on yourself, you will meditate on your ego, which is an aspect of the mind. So you don't want that. Because instead of expanding, you will be contracting more and more and more. So if you want to expand and become one with the universe, let's use that word, then you have to think of the universe. And let that universe be in you by constantly calling upon that idea that the universe is in me and wherever I am. That universe is your God. That idea, that concept. Now, when you want to grasp the universe, human mind is tricky. In order to find meaning, to get meaning, we need either sound or a form that carries meaning. Now, what is the form of the universe? I see stars and planets and, I don't know.
Everything.
Everything and more. And when it comes to God, if I tell you God, would you imagine the old man sitting on the cloud with a long beard watching you all the time? But in both concepts, in both ideas, there is the highest meaning, the highest thought you can think of. It's hard to grasp. Okay? But you give it a name and a symbol. And what Krishna is telling here, that you can only achieve and go beyond your mind by connecting to the self. Your real self. But your real self is so mixed up with matter and limitation. So you have to let your mind think of something higher. That something higher is an idea of a teacher, the idea of God, anything that can remind you what God is. And you have a relationship with God. As many say, we have a relationship with Jesus. But we, Advaitins, non-dualistic, we know that we do that for a reason. And I want you to share, I want you to know, I want to share these things with you. Because I'm not asking you to think of a God just because. I'm asking you to think of God because you understand the necessity of connecting with a higher principle, which is you. But you, the infinite you, the knower you, the always present witness of the changes of the universe. In order to think of that, we use our emotions. We use our emotions, we engage. How do you engage? Well, if something is truly important to you, you're going to take care of it. You're going to look after it. You're going to protect it. You're going to keep it clean. If you are into offering things, you're going to offer the best. Not just the best fruit when it comes to offering something to a shrine or something in the Indian tradition, we offer food a lot. But also the best of yourself, the best of your attention, the best of your concentration. And it doesn't have to be restricted to the spiritual concentration. Everything, whatever you do, needs to be given to your God. If you have a job, you have to give and do your best. Because that is not for you, it's for your God. have to pay attention, your best attention. You have to give your best attention in anything you do. No matter what it is. So what Krishna says here, think of me all the time. Offer me everything. Give me your mind. And also it says, give me your intellect. This power of reasoning, this power of understanding, give me that too, and I'll take care of you. You will live in me, meaning you will experience constant peace. The mic is on, son. If you do that, you will achieve slowly, you will live in peace. Because you have a purpose in life. You made up your minds to get hold of your minds. To be in control of your minds. So when you meditate, two things are important. First of all, we need to understand that our minds naturally pulls us constantly down by our impressions, samskaras, vasanas, vrittis, habits. So we have a problem there. We can't just be animals. We are human beings. We have to honor that. So it is natural that we have to have a regulated kind of life, a religious life. And it's good for us because that's what keeps us from the degradation, from the level of a human being to the level of an animal. We are more than that, and we know that. So what all these scriptures and this ancient spiritual heritage from India, what wants us to understand is this. We got a job to do here. We have to use our minds to help ourselves, to transcend it, and be who we truly are. I don't want to let it just be just for a few. And this is me thinking and sharing with you. This is for all of us. We all have the capacity. If we make up our minds, and if we make that commitment, if we get hold of our willpower and do something about it. First of all, I have to have a lifestyle that will help me grow spiritually. Second of all, I need to stay focused. I need to pay attention to what's going on with me. I need to keep it cool. I need to stay at peace, tranquil. I need to increase sattva in my life. Rajas and tamas are always present. Sattva is constantly struggling. Calm down, calm down. That's the nature of the mind. So all this information they're actually, to me, they're kind of treasures because they allow me to understand that it happens to all of us. It is nature. That's what it's called. Swamiji calls it nature. But we are not for nature. Nature is for us. We have to be in charge. So yes, you embrace a lifestyle where you embrace spiritual habits, not just you wear just not a sari or something that, makes you feel spiritual. But also you work with yourself. You lead a disciplined life. You make that commitment to connect with something higher every day. At least twice a day, 3 times a day, to close your eyes and offer yourselves. by practice of meditation, prayer, the repetition of the name of God, being reminded that you have to be unselfish and practice karma yoga, do something for others, observe your minds, because it's your right to be content. I'm not telling you happy, constantly content. It is your right as human beings. Because that's our nature. And the instrument to get that feeling, is the mind. We got it? Any other questions or comments? I'm sorry I went beyond my 45, 50 an hour. I went way beyond.
Way past.
Way past.
Okay.
Swamiji, can I ask a question? Very nice talk, but can I ask a question? This desire to control the mind, because I hear a lot of try to do this. I understand your point. Try to reach a state of one-pointedness, but is itself a desire, right? Is itself an aspiration? The point here is to control that, to reach a tranquil mind. You don't have to have any polarized desire to control it.
All right, good luck.
So it's like self-defeat.
You have to use that instrument to benefit yourself. You have to create some sattvic desire, to engage yourself in sattvic, what we call sattvic maya. Something that will help you grow and stay centered. Sri Ramakrishna says the only desire is the desire to know God. And from there you go. Now, you have to be careful also. Sometimes these desires makes you kind of like, always try to experience that which is nice and peaceful. Some days sattva prevails. Some other days sattva does not. You shouldn't lose your poise, your peace because of that. You should understand that that is the nature, not just of the mind, of the world. Look at the sky. Today is shiny, it's a shiny, beautiful day. Tomorrow is gray. Can you do something about it? No, but if you observe and say, okay, today is like this, but you change your attitude. Sometimes I can see that we fall into these desires of being, I need to be okay because I'm spiritual, I need to be happy. It's not the point. You are happy already. Vedanta encourages all of us to accept our divinity. And the nature of our divinity is bliss, constant and uninterrupted joy. Now that the instrument is a little cloudy, that's okay. But you know the truth. But you keep doing, you keep meditating. Besides, when you work with yourself, when you clean the sewage or anything, a lot of dirt and bad odor comes out. In the same way, when you work with yourself, a lot of things, samskaras, come to the surface. So instead of some people, they freak out and they just they want, oh, no, I can't, because they want to suppress. But it's not completely through suppression, but to embrace this and embrace and accept that certain things are the way they are. If it is a great day, well, it's a beautiful day. It is us who actually can change our reality constantly. But that we have to be reminded that we have to have a relationship with something higher other than our ego, that's a certain thing. The mind will keep changing. That's the nature of the mind. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, that outer world is Purna, full of divine consciousness. This inner world is Purna, full of divine consciousness. From Purna comes Purna. From the fullness of divine consciousness, this world is manifested. Taking Purna from Purna, Purna indeed remains, because divine consciousness is non-dual and infinite. Om, peace.